Welcome back. This week, we're going to work on chapter 6, which is families in transition. It's always a very interesting chapter, and I'm going to start sharing the screen. Okay, families in transition. We're going to skip over that. Okay. A normal transition, as opposed to things which are kind of out of the ordinary, like the birth of a younger sibling, family moving to a new area, or children changing schools, divorce, and I will have to say that it's something comical. Whenever I taught second grade, we're working with a bunch of 7-year-olds. And I remember going into class one day, and I spoke to the students, and I said, you know what, I'm really bummed today. I just found out that my parents are getting a divorce. And one of my children, the infinite wisdom of the 7-year-old, spoke up, and he said, that's okay, Mr. Gamble. You get twice as many presents at Christmas. Okay, moving on. Could be a death of a grandparent. Okay, now moving. We see a lot of, in the South, a lot of transients, migrant workers. So there's quite a bit of movement. So those children are constantly being uprooted. But many students move during the early childhood and elementary school years, and research has generally shown that a move can have a negative effect on student learning. So studies have found that students who experience a move have lower test scores and grades, and a higher chance of being held back. They are more likely to receive special education services. Now, several years ago, there was this movement, it's still around, but this initiative, No Child Left Behind. And then from that, the Common Core curriculum. And theoretically, the intent behind that was that there's a common curriculum that every state had to follow. That would mean the children who moved from school to school, state to state, would always be on the same playing field. And that just never happened. Okay, one of the things you can do is share books with the class about children who move to a new school. That can open up some discussions about the difficulties the move creates in a student's life. Now, you as the teacher, you need to reach out to the families through something as simple as a phone call or a note, and try to form a relationship quickly. Although it is important to realize that the family life after a move may be chaotic. And I just want to add a little bit more to that. Reaching out to the parents, not only of families where there has been a move, but I would recommend it for all your families. One of the best things I ever did as a new teacher was I made home visits. So I went to the home of every one of my students, because it was nice to meet the parents, for them to get to know me outside of the classroom, and kind of get a feeling for what kind of learning environment the children have at home. Something that's non-normative, in other words, it's just out of the norm. So non-normative transitions or changes in a person's life that do not occur at the physically, socially, or culturally expected time in the person's life cycle, and are more difficult for families to handle. And teachers need to be sensitive to the family stress created by both normal and non-normative transitions. And giving the example of an eviction, parent passing, dying of cancer, the mother of grown children finding out that she's pregnant. So timing, the transition lasts too long or the timing is off. The example includes a teenage pregnancy, a parent remarrying too quickly after a divorce, or a parent suffering along that with cancer. So for control, transitions, excuse me, are more difficult if the family members have no control over it. As you know, when a spouse walks out on the family, or the family has to move owing to the relocation of the family breadwinner's workplace, a less stressful transition would occur if the breadwinner chose to leave a job to take a better one, than if the move was based on a family decision. We have a rite of passage. So transitions are easier on families if there is some sort of ritual or ceremony to mark the transition, such as a graduation ceremony that signals the move from childhood to adulthood, a wedding that celebrates the beginning of a new family, or even a funeral that sparks the ending of a person's life. Transitions that have no ritual, such as a separation or divorce, may be more stressful for a family. And one thing I have learned since moving here is the importance of rituals in this area. So transitions that occur without warning are often difficult for the families to cope with, such as a family member being killed in an accident. Having time to prepare for the transition, such as the months leading up to the birth of a baby, knowing the baby's gender, and even having a planned date for delivery, could ease the stress of the transition. And again, going back to what I've learned since moving here, is that culturally, it may not be desired to know the gender of the child until birth. We can have a loss of status. So transitions that involve a loss of status, role, identity, or self-respect can be difficult for family members. So for example, the loss of a job, the divorce that requires a family to move into a smaller home, or children leaving the home, causing a stay-at-home mother to feel a loss of identity. As you know, mom can whether all that more difficult than a transition that involves a gain in status, such as a job promotion, a move into a larger home in a good neighborhood. We will forego the activity. So now, moving on, students and families undergoing separation, divorce, and remarriage. So research suggests that children and adolescents who go through the family transition of separation and divorce have more academic, social, and emotional difficulties than students who live with two biological parents. There is marked individual variability in how students adjust to change. Suggestions for working with children and families experiencing a separation, divorce, or remarriage. Allow the students time to talk about their feelings, but do not quiz them about their family situation. Help them express their feelings in acceptable ways. Respond to your students in a way that shows you're willing to listen and care about them and their family. Be alert to changes in behavior or schoolwork, and stay in contact with parents about the changes. And one item to note, if the child is having issues or what have you, not dealing well with the separation or divorce, you need to keep both parents in the loop, not just the custodial parent, that would be the parent that the child lives with. You as a teacher are responsible for letting both parents know what is going on with the child, unless there is a court order not to. And I had that experience actually my first year teaching second grade. So be sensitive to problems with getting work completed, concentrating in class, or acting out behaviors. As such, students are sorting through the many psychological, emotional, and physical changes occurring in their lives. And encourage non-custodial parents to remain active in the child's schooling and extracurricular activities. Send all communications, such as newsletters or notes to both parents' homes, as I said earlier, rather than asking the child to communicate information to the non-custodial parent. And so, let's see. You need to be as neutral as possible when parents separate And remember that it is not your role to judge either parent. Include both parents and step parents in conferences or meetings. Offer separate conference times if parents don't want to meet together. And trust me, there will be times where you would not want to be in the same room with parents who are not exactly, that's a nice way to put it, parents who are ticked at each other. Okay? To keep both parents informed about the child's schoolwork, such as projects or longer ranged assignments that may need to be completed on weekends when a child is visiting the non-custodial parent. Make an effort to involve non-custodial parents in classroom activities by inviting them to volunteer in the classroom or on field trips, have lunch with their child, or attend school functions. Now, once again, depending on the kind of relationship the either separated or divorced parents have, it can be a little bit tricky when you're inviting them to the class party or the field trips and what have you. But you will know, you'll have a better read on the parents. Use age-appropriate children's books with the whole group. Small groups or individuals to give children an opportunity to discuss divorce and remarriage and share their responses to the books through art, writing, or other creative expressions. If the student seems to be seriously affected, seek professional help from the school counselor or social worker. Consider organizing a support group facilitated by the school counselor, in which children in the school experiencing a divorce or separation can consult with the counselor about specific lesson problems. Now, some of the other things that will be listed now, the authors of the textbook are suggesting some things which may be difficult for you to tackle or may not necessarily want to take on that responsibility. So for schools with limited in-house counseling resources, consider seeking community mental health professionals to volunteer for sessions with both children and parents. This is, here again, from the author's perspective. I don't know that I would tackle that as a teacher. I would let the counselor handle that. And propose to your school administrator that your school offer parenting seminars on the effects of divorce and marriage on children, and the emotional support, positive parenting strategies that are effective. Once again, I would pass that along to the guidance counselor. And propose to your school administrator at your school to offer in-service training for teachers to help them better understand some issues of divorce and remarriage relating to school achievement, and in some ways which they can better provide support for students and families. Once again, death of a parent or family member. So the death of a parent or a family member is an exceptionally traumatic event. Even when we know that it's, let's say someone is terminally ill, and we try to prepare for it. You know, even as an adult, it's difficult to deal with, much less someone who's 5 years old. 1 out of every 20 children, 15 or younger, will lose one or both parents. So that's approximately 1.5 million children. So children who have lost a parent may suffer from anxiety, depression, anger, and sleep disorders such as nightmares, and may exhibit behavior problems such as aggression and acting out. Now, I did have a situation, and it was very, very unfortunate. I transferred to another school to teach third grade. So I did not know any of the other, I did not know the children before my first time meeting was in the fall. And one of the little boys, his name was Michael. Michael was suffering from, well, he had a lot of issues, and depression was one of the big ones. And I found out later why he was going through such a rough time. It appears that his mother left his father, which is hard enough for a child to deal with the separation of parents. But what made it even worse is when she left, she took Michael's brother with her. And so that happened to be two losses. And so Michael's father, who pretty much killed himself very, very young, was very interested in Michael's education. If I ever needed to talk to him, he didn't have a car, so he would walk to school. And evidently, one day, I don't know what Michael did, but his father ended up spanking him. So Michael called the Child Protective Services. So the next day at school, there was a knock on my door, and it was Linda, people who was the school counselor, and she asked me to step outside in the hall. When I did, there was, of course, Linda, and next to her, a deputy sheriff and a member from representatives from Child Protective Services. And they were there to take Michael. And please know that if Child Protective Services is going to remove a child, they will most likely do it at school because it's a most neutral location. But calling him out into the hallway and seeing what was happening, it's really tough, to be an adult and have the little one, stand there, tears running down his face and begging, prove this again, don't let them take me, don't let them take me. What makes it difficult is trying to console the child, trying to keep your composure, and then turning around and walking back into the classroom as if nothing ever happened. That's hard, and it's nothing we can prepare you for that. Not in the teacher ed program, we just can't do it. Okay, going back. I'm going to keep routines as regular as possible and offer extra nurturing as adults in the child's life. They might be emotionally unavailable. But be patient with the child if she regresses in behaviors such as bedwetting or displays aggressive acting out behavior or irrational fears. And answer the child's questions honestly, but be sensitive to the family's cultural or religious beliefs about death. And assure the child that he did not cause the death, and help family members recognize that it is not disrespectful for children to play and have fun, even while the family is grieving. You want to encourage the child to express feelings or remember the loved one through artwork, creating drama, writing letters to or stories about the person, and expect that holidays or the anniversary of the death may be a difficult time for the child. Be ready to provide extra support at these times and provide the child with an opportunity to do something in memory of the person who died. Such as making a memory book about a grandparent, or creating the treasure box, special keepsakes from the deceased sibling. And it's important to know that the authors of the textbook have more than likely have a very different cultural background than what we would find here. And so in this area, with various cultures, it may be totally inappropriate to keep something from the deceased loved one. We really have to consider our particular location, our area, when dealing with certain issues. So what the authors have in the textbook is not necessarily appropriate, basically, for where we are. Okay. Students who have parents in the military, that's a tough one too. So being part of a military family involves frequent transitions, and it can ultimately include losing a parent in the war. Many teachers unaware of the challenges faced by military families affected by deployment. To be career military, guard members, or even those in the reserves. What you want to do is include instructional practices that incorporate the military life, such as teaching military counting or do math activities that include counting as the number of soldiers in the troop brigade or battalion. Encourage classroom conversation that builds relationships and support among military and non-military students. So, for example, in a geography lesson, have students show on a map where their father or mother are, where they are, or include information about family deployments in classroom newsletters. You want to initiate more frequent contact with military parents than a typical parent, than a typical parent-teacher conference, or military families who may move or be deployed before the traditional fall or spring conferences. Schedule a special conference before they leave. Other issues facing military families. Children move every 2 to 4 years. They may be going to or coming from overseas schools. Discrepancy in kindergarten age requirement among school districts has to be considered. The change in schools includes record transfers, graduation requirements, lack of connection with extracurricular activities, and the quality of schools and teachers directly impacts quality of life for military. So families need regular communication, personal contact, and feedback. And folks, this doesn't just apply to military families. This is essential for all families. So during the time of deployment and separation, school is the most important element of stability for military families. So most important thing is a strong home-to-school connection. And parents in prison. So another difficult transition for children occurs when the parent is sentenced to jail and taken from the home. It is estimated that nearly 2 million children in the United States have at least one parent incarcerated in a state or federal prison. And something that is of interest, years ago, whenever I was teaching at a university in Pennsylvania, I volunteered to teach computer classes on the weekend at the county prison. And very different teaching environment altogether. But there was a parent who he had injured himself. He was a construction worker, injured his back at work, and he talked about his 2 daughters constantly. And, no doubt that man loved his little girls, and it was killing him to be in prison and away from them. And then this causes a kind of interesting ethical question. He said he couldn't get work, and he was not going to let his babies, his little girls, starve. So he started selling drugs. And now the ethical thing is, you say that's right or it's wrong, you have good intentions, is there something else to be done? But he made the comment to me, because if I had to do it all over again, I would. I'm not letting my baby starve. It was an interesting conversation. Okay, what kind of rights do children have who have parents who are incarcerated? The child has the right to be kept safe and informed at the time of the parent's arrest. Have the right to be heard when decisions are made about that child. Has the right to be considered when decisions are made about the parent, and have the right to be well cared for in the parent's absence, and have the right to speak with, see, and touch my parent. And I have the right, as the child, I have the right to support as I face the parent's incarceration, and have the right not to be judged by the label because of the parent's incarceration. And another story then, whenever I was teaching elementary, there was a parent and a student whose mother had been recently released from prison. And she was one of the most active parents I had that semester, or that school year rather. So she's a great person, but it wasn't the children who were talking about her. It was the parents of the other children who had an issue with the fact that she had been incarcerated, yet was spending time in the school around their children. And that child has the right to a lifelong relationship with the parent. The students in foster care, this is a tough one. So when a parent is incarcerated who dies and no one is available to care for the family's children, foster care may be the only option. So children may also be placed in foster care because of parental neglect or abuse. Foster care is a temporary placement of children with families outside the home, and it is not intended to be the permanent state. So whenever we talk about what makes a family, what different types of family do we have? We have blended, we have the nuclear, the typical mother, father, two children, whatnot, same sex parents. And the question has come up before, are foster children who are placed with another family, is that considered, are they considered family? And the answer to that is yes, they are. Okay, so children in foster care often do more poorly in school than those in permanent homes, and many, unfortunately, do not succeed with education. Because they may have attended school only sporadically before being placed in foster care, or have been in families where education is not a priority, foster children tend to be behind academically. Not all. It's important that we don't do blanket generalizations. Not all children will be done. So children placed in foster care may have emotional, behavioral issues, and they might blame themselves from being removed from the home. Not all children in foster care are often viewed negatively because of the difficulties they may present to a teacher. It's important to look at the potential of your foster child and have high expectations. And I cannot preach enough the necessity for you to be able to separate the child from the behavior. It doesn't just apply to foster children. This applies to all children. You've got to learn to separate the child from behavior. If a child is misbehaving, it's okay to address the issue, which I have done many times. For me, I'm not saying everyone should do this, but I would sit down where I could be eye to eye with the child. And I would make the comment,